Hi, I'm your host, Rick Sessinghaus, and excited to launch Flow Golf Podcast. Each episode, we will share stories, interview experts, and share cutting-edge strategies for peak performance. Here's my co-host, Hallam Morgan, to explain more about Flow Code Golf.
Thanks, Rick. Flow Code Golf is a framework of strategies, principles, and techniques that take us from fear to the state of flow, the state of optimal performance, and the zone where we play our best golf. You can find out more about Flow Code Golf at www.flowcode.golf. And I just want to finish up by saying this podcast is as much your podcast as it is ours. So please ask questions, provide feedback, and get engaged. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome back, all listeners, to the Flow Golf Podcast. Rick, I'm so excited to discuss what is, in some sense, an important flow trigger, competitiveness. We don't often speak about it. Sometimes we get a little bit careful about speaking about competitiveness and comparison and stuff like that, but wanted to discuss that today on today's podcast. Could you share a little bit of information, some stories maybe about competitiveness, how you define it and how you see it can be valuable for people of all levels?
Yes, and I think you just mentioned it. It's a word that I think is getting diluted throughout the last 10 years. I grew up in a very competitive household with sports and even academics, and competitiveness as I grew up, there was certainly about winning and losing. You went to a football game, and if you lost, you lost. And it was a very simple, clear definition of winning and losing. I think throughout the last, like I said, 10 to 15 years here in the States, I think that's been diluted a little bit because it's now been a little bit political correct to not really shine too much light on the winner and, oh my gosh, the loser, we got to take care of them and stuff like that. And I get that at an early age, you're not just going to beat down that the only success is driven through winning or losing. The issue, though, is, to me, competitiveness has always led to improvement. So if I looked at myself and I said, I just lost that football game, or I just shot 78 in the junior tournament and I lost, I first look at, was that the best version of me out there? Did I do my best? And sometimes that answer is no, I did not. I made a mistake here. I threw an interception here. I had 2-3 putts. I believe that's a very powerful question to just say, hey, there is now a gap that I can shrink, a performance gap, I call it, that I can get better at, and not to gloss it over. It's like, well, you don't always win. You don't. And I think we have to be careful of just, like I said, diluting the competitiveness of pushing ourselves. To me, competitiveness is about adding challenge, taking on challenge from an internal view first. Certainly there's external competitiveness of, did I win or lose? Totally get that. I'm looking at it from a standpoint of, was I better today than I was yesterday? And that could be through a score. It also could be what you and I talk a lot about with the different processes of, hey, I committed to 80% of my shots today. I stayed composed today. To me, that's a level of competitiveness. I want to be better today than I was yesterday. And I think it's fine to want to compete and want to win. I think that's, in the United States, I think that's what's built a lot of our success as a country is to push the limits and get better. Back to kind of golf and, something that I've admired with Collin Morikawa for all these years is, as a young junior, part of my coaching was always to compete with him at the end of a lesson and end of a session. And it might be, hey, closest to the hole for a chip shot or a putt, or hey, who can hit the straightest drive, or whatever that may be. And again, the age of 8, 10, 12, 14, what most impressed me about him is he took on the competition. And it wasn't in a big grandiose way. It's just like, hey, Collin, closest to the hole, let's go. And he's like, okay. And it was a very simple, he wanted to take on the challenge. He believed he could beat me. And whether he did or not was almost irrelevant in the moment, is that it's taking that challenge on, which sparks focus, which sparks creativity, which sparks childlike, which a lot of the flow triggers that you and I talk about, it was already built into this idea of competing. And he took it on at a very early age. And as you can see to this day on the PGA Tour, he loves to compete. It is a way for him to stay focused and push himself. And again, push ourselves is a good thing. Let's get better than we were yesterday. So that's how I look at being competitive.
No, I love that. Absolutely love that. And obviously, it's the biggest priority of all elite performers is to become their best version. And you see it as a common skill or common trait across a lot of successful athletes, especially those at the top level of their game. I remember hearing a story of Kobe Bryant and another NBA player called Jay Williams. It was actually Jay Williams telling the story, but he was in there prepping for a match, and he's there like really going through the gears, really putting some work in. And he notices actually that Kobe is there as well. Kobe Bryant's there before him. And they're both prepping. And Jay's obviously, this Jay Williams is kind of very conscious of, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm putting the work in, and Kobe sees that I'm putting the work in. Jay Williams finishes and Kobe continues, not for an extra 10 minutes, not for an extra 20 minutes, not for an extra 30, but an extra hour and a half of full plays, proper full plays. And Jay went and asked him after the game, he said, why did you do that? And he said, because I saw you come in, I saw you were there, and I wanted you to know that no matter how hard you work, I'm willing to work harder. Now, I think the thing here is he didn't compare himself to Jay, but he actually utilized Jay Williams to compete. He used him to say, look, I'm not actually trying to do me versus Jay, but I'm actually trying to still improve myself, but I'm doing it with the support of Jay without him even realizing. And I think that's a really important comparison. It's something that I even remember hearing in various interviews from Messi and Ronaldo and the relationship between them in the football world, in the soccer world, and saying, well, actually, they're really grateful for each other because they're not sure either of them will have reached the level they did if it hadn't been for the other person. And I think that's something that's how I view competitiveness anyway, is it's very much it's a me versus me situation, but with you versus you. So if I try and compete with you, Rick, I'm actually trying to compete against myself, but I'm competing with you in support of you to ensure that we both move forward. And that's kind of the common understanding and the common desire in that relationship, is that we both want to improve. We both want to get better, and we want to support each other in that endeavor. So I see that as really important. And we actually saw that right at the Masters on the 18th with probably Collin and Rory.
Yeah, and you bring up a very good point, is that if you talk to these elite performers and ask them, about their competition, they want their competition to play really, really well, so they can push themselves to say, hey, is my best better than their best?
Yeah, exactly.
And it keeps spiraling up to where you say, wow, I pushed myself because that person was at their best, and that brought the best out of me and my focus, and so on and so forth. And yeah, being at the Masters this year and being in the final round and seeing Collin and Rory paired together and just feeding off of each other, right? Is they have mutual respect for each other. They enjoy, watching each other play to a point, but when somebody's playing better than you or scoring better, if you're competitive, you go, well, wait a second. No, I'm going to beat you, right? And so there was a very give and take during that round where, Rory makes an eagle on 13 and Collin puts an eagle right on top of them. They make the birdies. They get into 18. Rory hits this unbelievable bunker shot that goes in. Collin, celebrates it. Hey, well, that was awesome. And yet there might have been, okay, but now it's my turn. And he now puts it in on top, and then they both celebrate. And you saw not only the best performance, but you saw them as a person come out, and you're celebrating greatness. You're celebrating that high level, yet you did want to be at your best. You weren't distracted by somebody else's play. In fact, you used it as fuel. You used it as a way to focus, to say, wait a second, awesome, look what he did. Okay, let's go with that. And I think that's obviously a positive way to go about it. And they did that throughout the entire round, which was beyond fun to watch.
Absolutely. I think really the top performers understand that actually competitors are sometimes their allies, not necessarily their enemies, right? Because as you said, that relationship was very much I want to perform my best with you. I don't want to perform my best at the detriment of your performance, because everyone knows that if both of them are performing great, all of a sudden there's some great competition there, and that's where special things start to appear. So I completely agree on that. I love it. And it actually brings in a lot of the stuff we speak about at Flow Code, which is one of the essential channels of flow, which is social flow, right? There's so many components there, but for them to have the same goal, they both want to achieve the same thing. Actually, some communication going between, some shared communication skills between the two of them. They're both passionate about the same things, and that really brings out high levels of performance.
No question. And I think we've all seen it in golf where the group you're playing with could affect your performance. Now, we have to be careful of that because we can't always sign up with our best friends on a beautiful day and all the different things in the environment. Yet, as a competitor, can I look at who I'm playing with and use that as a flow trigger? I got to play yesterday with some dear friends of mine, and they're good players. So you have a good player and they hit a good shot. You go, okay, that's great. I congratulate you, but I want to be part of this too. And then there's the fun and there's the banter and those type of things that could change our state, right? If I'm having fun and trash talking and those type of things, I'm going to be in a different state than if I'm with players I don't like and, oh my gosh, their etiquette's bad, right? That wasn't my skill set, but it is getting affected by who I'm playing with. And we call that kind of that social flow, right? Is how do we connect with people? How do we use this as a positive focal point instead of a distraction?
Definitely. And I think some people would say, and definitely my perspective on it, but some people would say that competing against others can be beneficial. And I don't disagree, but I believe it's more of a short-term benefit rather than a long-term benefit. So if it's me competing against Rick, not competing with Rick, but against Rick, I believe I could have some short-term gain from that, but I don't believe it's sustainable. When it's me competing against me, all of a sudden, I believe that's when it's long-term, and that's when it becomes sustainable. That's when it becomes so much more beneficial for my long-term development. So that's kind of my view on that. But when it comes to competitiveness, Rick, there's different ways of, I guess, expressing that competitiveness, right? And I guess every single person needs to understand how they express their competitiveness. So I know you've mentioned a couple of times that Collin and various other players that you work with, it's not always this massive external kind of competitiveness, like I'm going to beat you and it's vocal but sometimes it can be quite internal. So I just wanted you to talk a bit about your perspective on expressing competitiveness and people understanding actually how to do that.
Right. And I think everybody has different personalities. So this is not saying one size fits all, but I think it's, you and I talk about mindset a lot. And for the listeners out there is, how are they going to define being competitive within themselves, right? I want to go to this round of golf and how am I going to be competitive? Now, some people will just look at it from a score standpoint. Oh, I want to shoot blank. And if that means I beat them, then I win. That's fine. That's very much the numbers game. I get it. You and I talk about a little deeper of the competitiveness of maybe trying a new shot for the day or seeing how focused I can be. Maybe I can get creative with my visualization and how sharp can I get that visualization, right? So we're now creating our own level of metrics, okay, that we can compete against ourselves, to me has been the most powerful way to get improvement. Okay. There's certainly external competitiveness, which I think is a positive. There's no question about that. We mentioned that. Yet when we look at it, we're going to go step to the first tee. After 18 holes, how will I know I was a better version? How will I know that I, competed against myself that day and won? Okay. And those are the processes you and I talk about. That's being proud of bouncing back after a double bogey. Those are those little intangibles that add up, and you look back and go, wow, I was better today. I was more resilient. I was anti-fragile. I was focused, even there was a lot of stuff going on the golf course. To me, that is a level of competitiveness because there's challenge out there. We set ourselves up to succeed in those challenges, to push ourselves.
Absolutely. Rick, it's obviously, and for all level of golfers, for some of the mini tour players that obviously inside our platform and those that aren't, it's coming up to the beginning of the season, or the season's just started. And it just for your standard club golfer, for anyone listening, it's coming up to warmer weather. Well, here in the UK it is anyway. California, it's warmer all year round, but it's coming up to warmer weather. So people are starting to get their clubs out. And we have what is often named maybe a little bit of competitive rust sometimes. We haven't played that much recently. We haven't been in those competitive environments. What are some of the ways that you would suggest players of all levels can start to regain that competitive edge as they come into the season?
That's a good point. I'm going to answer a couple different ways. One, I think you and I will talk about this on future podcasts, but expectations, right? So let's say last season, at the end of last season, I was playing really, really well. My index was down, a lot of good things happening. And then now, because of the weather and because of just off season, you don't play as much. Okay. So there's an obvious, I'm not playing as much, practicing as much. The skills would probably be affected. Okay. That's true. Right. But I think what the challenge for people is when the competitiveness is just with score, and yes, there's going to be rust on the physical skills, they'll just say, oh, okay. And they'll either get really mad when they don't play well the first part of the season, which is now their expectations aren't met. So that's frustration. But I think what you and I are looking at is, I don't believe we are going to be as rusty competitiveness as you would think. Okay. I think if you have an intention day in and day out to go to the gym and push yourself at the gym, you're being competitive. And I think you'd go do your mindfulness meditations daily, and you do the 10 minutes that you didn't want to do, but you did it anyways. To me, that's competitiveness. Then you go on the golf course, it's just who you are. And that becomes part of that you take on challenges and stuff like that. Your physical skills may be rusty. You may not, your short game may not be as sharp because you just haven't done it over the season. But I'm a big believer that every day you can be competitive with yourself and then bring that out to the first tee.
Love it. Competitiveness becomes a habit almost. And I think we'll obviously speak about this in a later podcast, but speaking about that difference between the human and the athlete, or actually the similarity between the human and the athlete, and making sure that you apply these things in all aspects of your life, because then it becomes part of your identity, becomes part of just who you are. So if you're competitive in the gym against your latest PBs, if you're competitive, as you say, in making sure that you show up, even when your inner critic says, I don't want you to do that, this isn't going to be nice, this isn't going to be enjoyable, you get in that cold shower and you stay in that cold shower, you're competing against yourself every single day, and it becomes a habit. And we know, obviously, as you stack those habits, it becomes part of your identity. So I think that's absolutely huge and a really important component of building competitiveness. I love it.
And so when people look at competitiveness, again, there is a winning and losing. You and I are very much into habits and tracking that. And so you can now look at, like in golf, we're not going to make all of our 10 footers. We're going to make we want to make a higher percentage. But to me, we want to get a little bit better every single day, and tracking those things, I think, is important, or at least journalizing. Hey, did I do the things I said I was going to do? And I think that helps not only our competitiveness, but as we've talked about in past and we will talk in future about confidence, right? Confidence also comes from doing the things you say you're going to do, whether it's at a highest level or not, is you now are congruent with who you want to be. And I just think the competitiveness is giving yourself a little bit of a push. I think the last thing I want to talk about is competitive doesn't mean you put your these goals out there that are too big too early. Some of the research that I've read is, if I can push a player 1 to 4% outside of their current comfort zone or skills, they're more likely, one, to be focused, and two, there's a belief like, yeah, I think I can do it, but it's gonna have to push myself. And so these incremental changes, incremental competitive goals, I think is crucial too. When we start a season of golf, right, everybody gets, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do this, and they get very, very excited, which is awesome, but it blows them out of the water on the first week because they just haven't done the incremental changes. So that's my last little thing that I want people to do is competitive doesn't mean you say you're going to win the US Open next year. It means, how can I get a little bit better today than I was yesterday?
I love that. And equally, I'm not going to try and compete with my iron play against Collin Morikawa, let's be honest. But it comes down to, and it kind of brings the conversation of environment and associations into play. Being very conscious about who you're spending time with, and are they the right competitor in order to help you both become your best version. We spoke about Messi versus Ronaldo, and we spoke about Kobe versus this Jay Williams, but ultimately they're almost very close in terms of their level. They're both hugely high performers, and they push each other to be their best. But the reason they push each other to be their best is because they know both on their best day, they can be better than one another. It's always this kind of back and forth. And I think that's something that's really important on the competitiveness side. To create this ideal competitive environment, we need to ensure that we're matching ourselves and spending time with those that create that environment for competitiveness. They don't create that environment of too much kind of, I will say, detrimental comparison, where there's a huge gap between the two of you, and then one person feels a little bit demotivated almost. You actually want, and it comes, I guess, back to talking about flow and talking about the challenge versus skills balance, right? Making sure that your skills both match one another, because then we know the challenge is going to be just about right to get you both into that flow zone. So I think that's vital.
Yeah, and I think, again, the key word is challenge. You on our platform, you've done a great job. We have this 21-day challenge. It's called 21-day challenge, right? So each day you're challenging that golfer to become a better version and to compete against themselves, and then by 21 days, they look back and they go, wow, I accomplished a lot. And it was all these little things that added up. And I think that's what we want from our students and our clients is, I'm a big believer in that a golfer will start to self-coach themselves. That's a good thing. That takes you take ownership, you take accountability. You certainly want to get information and knowledge from experts like you and me, yet I want them to be able to get up in the morning and go, man, I can't wait to do this, right? To me, that's the competitiveness that is what I'm searching for with players. Yes, it's easy to say, hey, I'm going against this person, I want to beat them. Awesome, good. But I'm a big believer in the internal competitiveness of day to day.
Love it. Love it. Rick, pleasure as always. Really enjoyed that podcast, speaking about competitiveness and how we can both train it to some extent and then also leverage it for our benefit to create our best version. So thanks again. Thanks all for listening, and we'll catch you soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I know you've received some incredible information, and if you would like to hear more, please subscribe. Rick, how can our listeners learn more about the Flowco Golf Academy?
Are you a coach or a player? Well, I've created 2 free masterclasses. One for a coach to help you grow your mental game coaching business, and one for a player to master your mental game. Head over to www.flowco.golf to gain free access now.